Welcome back, my friends. Seven Sparrows here, ready to continue our journey. Can you believe this? I sure can't, but here I am making another video. It's just one of those things. Once you realize how much time, work, and effort it takes to make a video, it just so happens that in the middle of making quote unquote the video of your lifetime, if you will, you come across even more information you want to add to your theory. Finally, I understand what a nightmare editing videos can be, so I just decided to make another video. Now, to recap a little bit, my channel will be largely focused on ancient maps, particularly the Mappa Mundis, and also focusing on the grand what if theories of what if the Mappa Mundi is the true map of the world, and the giant theme park theory. These theories are smaller branches of a bigger theory, if you will, of what if America is and always was the promised land of Canaan. Yes, literally. I know this sounds crazy, but you're just gonna have to bear with me and enjoy this little journey of what if. All of this is discussed in my previous video, so check that out for an in-depth overview kind of look. As stated before as well, I do not necessarily believe these theories quite yet. However, with the reality as it is presented to us making no sense whatsoever, I am going to keep walking down this rarely taken trail as far as I can and see where it goes. And you all are welcome to come along with me. Just take a deep breath. Now, there is a particular video out there talking about the possible true location of Mount Zion, and as a sidetrack on that video, even speculating where the Tower of Babel could have been. Which is great that more people are starting to understand that our modern maps are wrong. However, I do not at all agree that the Tower of Babel was in the middle of Africa somewhere, as this particular video proposes. Now, I cannot say anything on the topic of Mount Zion at this time, but I have come across some interesting information as far as the Tower of Babel is concerned. This, of course, is in step with the theory I have presented in my other video that America is nothing but a mask over the land once belonging to the Babylonians, i.e., the true land of Canaan. History is written in the perspective of the victors. How many generations do you suppose it takes to completely blind the world? My guess is not many, maybe 2 or 3. Now, to our overlords, it was a new land. However, in the perspective of my theory, the land of Canaan was definitely not a new land, proved by the many evidences of the numerous empires and people groups having visited quote-unquote America. Babylonians, Assyrians, Phoenicians, Minoans, Hittites, Israelites, Romans, Vikings, and even the Chinese. I mean, if nearly every major empire has visited North America, then clearly it is not a new land anymore, especially if there were 500 nations of quote-unquote Native Americans living in it already with better hygiene practices and city infrastructure that far surpassed what was available in London at the time. Note also, a point I made in my previous video was that Columbus used Zacuto's Hebrew navigation charts. Why did Columbus use Hebrew navigation charts? If he was searching for India like he was saying, would it not make sense he would have used some navigation chart sourced from India? But of course, if he was secretly trying to get to Canaan, full of Hebrew peoples, with the intent on destroying them, then it would make perfect sense that he would use a Hebrew navigation chart to get back to them to accomplish his evil mission. So anyhow, how this ties into the topic of the ruins of the Tower of Babel. Originally, I had just kind of assumed that Yahweh entirely obliterated the Tower of Babel into a pile of ash that was blown away into the wind. I have recently come to understand that this is possibly not the case. The Book of Jasher, though it did not receive canonization status from the corrupted Council of Nicaea, is a truly incredible book that, in my opinion, does nothing to diminish Yahweh's sovereignty nor his ways, claimed to be as old as the book of Job, that gives incredible context and detail to well-known biblical stories and characters. Now, if you want to see the supernatural, all-powerful hand of Yahweh at work in his people, you have to read this book. I would argue that the Tower of Babel was not located in Africa, mainly because many instances in Jasher mentions Cushite kings who lived in Ethiopia coming to the land of Canaan. This would indicate that Canaan is not in Africa. The video that promotes this also is faulty in that while it cherry picks descriptions of the Tower of Babel from the book of Jasher, they stop there. Had they kept reading further, they would have seen the very clear details of how the Tower of Babel was destroyed and what could be left of it to this day. We'll read this section of Jasher together. Jasher 9 will start in verse 31. And they built the tower and the city, and they did this thing daily, until many days and years were elapsed. And Yahweh said to the 70 angels who stood foremost before him, to those who were near to him, saying, Come, let us descend and confuse their tongues, that one man shall not understand the language of his neighbor. And they did so unto them. And from that day following, they forgot each man his neighbor's tongue, and they could not understand to speak in one tongue. And when the builder took from the hands of his neighbor lime or stone which he did not order, the builder would cast it away and throw it upon his neighbor, that he would die. And they did so many days, and they killed many of them in this manner. And Yahweh smote the 3 divisions that were there, and he punished them according to their works and designs. Those who said, We will ascend to heaven and serve our gods, became like apes and elephants. Note here, I will do a video soon on this statement right here and what this curse could mean, and I am so excited about it. But let's move on. And those who said, We will smite the heaven with arrows, Yahweh killed them, one man through the hand of his neighbor. And the 3rd division of those who said, We will ascend to heaven and fight against him, Yahweh scattered them throughout the earth. And those who were left amongst them, when they knew and understood the evil which was coming upon them, they forsook the building, and they also became scattered upon the face of the whole earth. And they ceased building the city and the tower. Therefore he called that place Babel. Note here also, one argument in that same video mentioned earlier claimed that there is not a city with the name Babel on the theme park Israel area on our maps. We have to keep in mind that names of places have consistently been changed to confuse us. Any map newer than the 1500s is, in my opinion, suspect of many falsehoods. Notice this is also the century where other mentalities of thoughts were going through quote-unquote reformation as well in nearly every area of study. Many lands were renamed, many sciences were invented as knowledge, doing away with the old world for the new world. In the end, all it was stage play theme change, essentially. Now back to Jasher here. For there, Yahweh confounded the language of the whole earth. Behold, it was at the east of the land of Shinar. Notice, it does not say that Babel is supposed to mean gateway of the gods either. And if somehow there is any kind of source for that information, it's probably a Babylonian source. And as to the tower which the sons of men built, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up 1/3 part thereof, and a fire also descended from heaven and burned another third. And the other third is left to this day, and it is of that part which was aloft, and its circumference is 3 days' walk. Now, in my opinion, the ruins of the Tower of Babel, based on that last statement, cannot be a stereotypical mountain because it needs to have a circumference, kind of, more so of a circular measurement, as if you have just cut down a tree and you're measuring the circumference of the tree stump. The official definition of circumference is the enclosing boundary of a curved geometric figure, especially a circle. Does it say the tower was buried in water? No. One can theorize all they want, but with zero scriptural support, it is a big red flag. Does the Mercator Map's Red Sea look like it has a circumference? Sorry, but that's a definite no. I have to just say, if epic music can make you feel like you're eating a holy grail of a burrito, it can definitely make you believe that a faulty proposition being presented to you as seemingly true as well. Now, Dasher then implies that the utmost top of the tower is likely still somewhere visible today. During construction, near its completion, they had to make sure to send brick shipments every day or it wouldn't reach the construction point in time. This obviously indicates that this was indeed a gargantuan tower. Now, back to my favorite maps here. While the Ravina Mappa Mundi provides us little detail in this area, the Dover map does. The Dover map is the elder in this respect, as it is from the 1200s, while the Ravina is from the late 1400s. Notice in any work done by different men, there will always be a small margin of error. Here, the Dover map appears to have the mountain ranges wrongly oriented compared to the Ravina Mappa Mundi, but perhaps I'm wording this wrong, because it could very well be that the Dover Mappa Mundi is actually more accurate since it is older than the Ravina by 200 years. Based off the Dover map, the Tower of Babel, as you can see here, is quite close in proximity to the Rocky Mountain range. Now, because we are still very young in our true map theory or quest, that is the only requirement we will look for at this time. Along with, hopefully, we will find a more obvious two-dimensional circular geographical shape we could identify and hopefully measure that has a circumference of a 3 days walk. Now let's see. What could possibly match that description? At first, Devil's Tower came to mind. Is it monumental? Yes. Is it Tower of Babel monumental? No. Is it circular on the top? No. Okay, so scratch that. Clearly, the top of the tower would be kind of a flat circle, right? For some reason, while meditating on this thought, a phrase came to my mind. Search for the biggest flat top mountain in the world. So I did, and here's what came up. Grand Mesa Mountain in Grand Junction, Colorado. And I about choked on my heart, because as you can see here, it really does kind of look like a huge structure that sunk into the ground, hence the mountains near and around it. Naturally, so much brick being swallowed up by the ground, there would be some visible after effect around the area. The Grand Mesa is part of the Grand Mesa National Park. Note, searching for images is actually very hard to find a picture of the flat top. I mean, just even a picture, let alone an entire picture of it. Of course, this wouldn't happen to be on purpose now, would it? Based off of the Dover map, the Tower of Babel location was said to be nearby Nimrod's castle, as you can see here. If we read in Jasher, we find that Abraham and his nephew Lot used to live near Nimrod for a time, but eventually moved near the Great Salt Lake area. At least Lot did for sure. As you can also see on the Dover map, Nimrod's castle is quite near the Tower of Babel. And mind also that his castle does appear to be somehow in the mountains of the quote-unquote Rockies mountain range, if you will. Later in Jasher, when Nimrod's army is preparing to go to war, it says that his army was made up of 800,000 men. So we would definitely need lots of land to support that many people, as the numbers were likely to have tripled after accounting for women and children. Also to keep in mind, this whole area had at least 5 kingdoms living near each other. I need to add here that we had recently taken a road trip to the Utah area. In doing so, we drove through Grand Junction, Colorado. We took I-70 west to US 40. And let's just say what an incredible sight to behold that drive was, especially when you have a crazy theory like mine in the back of your head. While driving through Grand Junction, not only is it surrounded by these, quote-unquote mountains that seriously look like old castles and fort walls, some, by the way, that do appear like they had been liquefied by heat at some point, but there are also many large boulders all over the place. You can tell they worked very hard to hide the rectangular shaped bricks tend to have, but every now and then there were definitely a few boulders here and there that they missed that definitely did still have that rectangular shape. Some of these bricks had to have been as big as a car. I didn't really think about this information until after our trip, so next time we drive through, I will definitely get photographs of my own. However, while I did not take pictures of those boulders, I at least did take a few pictures at some point that I thought was important at the time. What was striking is that once across the Utah border, and past the mountains, there are many, and I mean many mountains, if you will, in the distance that truly resemble possibly the ruins of ancient cities, possibly belonging to, oh, I don't know, certain ancient people groups that mainstream officials claim to have found no archaeological evidence in the theme park Israel, of course. Like you'd find anything there, right? Interestingly, if there is a way to get to these, cities, was what it looked like, we would have to find out, as there were definitely very adequate barbed wire fencing the entire length of the drive through this area. Pictures truly do not do justice. When driving through this area, with my theories in my mind, I was totally enthralled. I mean, there has to be something to this. So Jasser had told us that the circumference of what was left of the top of the tower is 3 days' walk. Let's calculate that first. An average man's walking speed is 3.1 miles per hour. Based off of this calculation, a 3 days walk would amount to about 223 miles. How about we take an aerial view of the Grand Mesa and see what it looks like? And here it is. Interestingly, if we take measurements of the elevated portions, including and around the Grand Mesa, there is indeed kind of a faint circular shape to it. Naturally, with such supernatural destruction the tower took, it wouldn't necessarily be a perfect circle. But there is kind of a circular imprint here, as I have illustrated for you here. And curiously, the circumference of this area came out to be approximately 241.5 miles, as you can see in this image here. The small variation in the number of miles could possibly be accounted for by the possibility a man's walking pace during biblical times were likely more efficient, per se. Regardless, this is kind of an intriguing find, if you ask me. There are many locations of so-called book hills around the Grand Mesa, and these may be due to the calamities that happened to the tower. And the land in this area do look like the aftermath of heavy instant stress in some form or another. So if that's not enough to kind of get you excited for a moment, I saved the best for last. Again, as I was saying earlier, it is very difficult to find a full picture of the Grand Mesa tabletop. But eventually, there it was in all its glory. What do you think?